Welcome to this latest edition of Communication with the Headmaster. I'm John Smith, your headmaster, and obviously we are meeting under really different circumstances. I've got a awesome group of students here from Mr. Sweeney's TV media class, and I know that a lot of excellent questions have been put together asking, what's going on, what have we been doing since we've been closed, and then sort of what are some of the anticipated plans for moving forward. Really appreciate the students' patience and flexibility. It's certainly not something that we are anticipating yet. I think under the circumstances, everyone is hanging in there to the best of their ability and doing what we can. So I know that we have a number of questions, and I don't know if there's a particular route we want to go, but maybe I just happen to have people across my screen. So maybe Nora Raftery, maybe you could ask the first question.
Yeah, sure. So, do you think that DS has been doing a good job with online learning, and do you think the communication has been good from the teachers?
Yeah, so like any circumstance, I think that, there's always things we can do better. So, I'm not going to say that we've handled this perfectly. It's unprecedented. We clearly were not a school that was familiar with a lot of online learning. Just last year we brought VHS online learning back. So we had a few students who were taking some online courses actually, and still are, which is interesting. But that being said, I think we have incorporated things like Google Classroom, and people now are using Zoom. And I've been pleased with some of my less technologically savvy teachers who have been able to kind of step it up a bit, whereas some other people who were already kind of using a lot of technology, I think it was a little bit more, it was an easier transition and less seamless. Uh, for some other people, it's been a little bit of a struggle trying to figure those things out. In terms of, overall, how would we rate ourselves or whatever? I'd say we've done a good job. I wouldn't say excellent, because I think that moving forward, one of the things we will do is obviously have contingency plans if we ever have to do something like this again. I hope we never do in our lifetime. As a former student of history, you have to go back to the great influenza of 1917, 1918, where you saw massive closures to this extent. That being said, scientists and medical researchers have said, these sorts of pandemics are possible. And I think as a public school system, moving ahead, just like hospitals will be probably better prepared with their medical supplies and their ventilators and their PPEs, we as a school will be better prepared to handle this type of thing, even if it's a shorter term basis. Let's say we had a tornado come through, or we had a hurricane that caused massive damage to the school, where we'd be able to do, I think, a better job quicker at doing that. That being said, I've talked to a lot of nearby principals, and a lot of our schools, a lot of public schools, were in similar places. So we first did the enrichment piece, which we know for some students worked, for some students it didn't work. But we had to do the enrichment piece just because we really had to kind of ramp things up and make kids comfortable with this whole process. Merritt, you want to ask the next question?
Yeah. Okay, so what are your biggest concerns as we transition to online school in the DS community? How do you predict we will combat these issues?
Yeah, so it's an excellent question. And I think, some of my biggest concerns are I want to make sure that we do what's right by students in fairness for grading, and fairness for GPA, and fairness for their learning and transitioning. I have no doubt that the seniors are going to be ready for college. I mean, this closure didn't suddenly change that process where you're not going to be ready for undergraduate work. I think if anything, it was disruptive for seniors in sort of the end of the year and how they had hoped things would transition with friends and, those sorts of memories. Overall, I just want to make sure that when students who are returning to DS next year are able to move into their next series of classes, some of which don't require previous learning. Maybe it's a different course, but like math and science, maybe it does. And we just want to ensure that our teachers understand that, which they do, and that they're also, looking at that. So maybe they'll be in a different place to start the school year with pre-calc or calculus. because there might be a little something that needs to be reviewed or you need to go over just to ensure that everyone's on the same page. So for me, those are some of the biggest things. I think what's clear is students just want to have the chance to connect again with each other, the social interactions, because that's a big part of high school. I think that books and research and online and computers and all that, you can manage it, you can figure it out, but it's really being able to have a discussion in Mr. Bork's government class, or being able to chat with Miss Collins, or do something cool with Mr. Bridger. It's those things that I think we've missed out on, and what we want to try to do is just make sure that when students start the school year next fall, that things are in a good place and that we're doing what's right by students, both from a grading standpoint, but also just from a personal well-being standpoint. Jennifer, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good, good. Do you want to ask the next question?
Yeah, sure. The next one is, will online learning change how we approach finals this year?
Yeah, I definitely will. So we had a meeting with department heads, a Zoom meeting last week, and yeah, I think it's very likely that we're not going to have final exams. I think what we'll probably do is there might be like a chapter assessment or something. A lot of it will depend on if we do return. And for seniors in particular, we're really trying to minimize that, just because we're not going to cram, 3 weeks of instruction and then suddenly give you a final. So I think it's unlikely seniors are going to have finals, and it's probably somewhat unlikely that our underclassmen are going to as well. Instead, there might be a project or just something different that would not require all the full year's learning. So online learning, I think moving ahead to the future, will also kind of prepare us for maybe a blended learning. What's interesting is I just finished an online course myself at Harvard. Has this program that I'm in, and it's fascinating because I'm with people all over the world, and so I kind of learned a lot just about how do you interact with these groups. I had a person on my team from India, and I had to recognize that they're on the other side of the world and time difference and everything. So I do think online learning will probably be more common, and blended learning will be more common moving forward in high schools, as we progress through our curriculum. Sarah, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Do you want to ask the next question?
Sure. Um, will, or no, sorry. As an administrator, is this on precedented time? What have you learned from this experience?
Yeah, a lot. You learn that you need to be adaptable. You need to be flexible. It's funny. Instead of my office being at DS, my office is in my dining room, and I'm having Zoom conferences at 7 p.m., at 8 a.m., at 2 o'clock after walking the dogs. So it's really very, very different. And I've got some friends who are in the business world who do work virtual office, and they can have it. I much prefer being in person. I know that for some of them it works. The biggest thing is obviously having some structure and organization. But I think what I've learned too as an administrator is there are so many moving parts that when we're in school, we can take care of a lot of those things. So, Sarah, if you came down to the office and just had a quick question, I can give you that quick answer and we can move on. Whereas when we are online and separate and doing virtual, sometimes the time lag getting back to you, or, communicating that out to more people, it just makes it a little more complicated. And I recognize how many quick responses I probably give in a day. I probably answer, I don't know, maybe 50 to 100 questions between students and faculty that now requires email, or requires a letter, or requires a Google Doc with frequently asked questions, or, so it's layered that much more. And I'm definitely a people person. I think most of you know that. So that part of it for me, it's been fine, but I definitely much more enjoy the in-person, being able to sort of brainstorm and problem solve issues. Layla, how about you? You want to ask the next question?
Yes.
How do you recommend students should use their time in quarantine to be most productive in school?
Yeah, I'm sure that each of you, and I'd be curious to kind of hear your own experiences. I think structure, right? Early on during enrichment, it was probably a little willy-nilly, and it was probably like, all right, I'll check my computer, or I'll do a little bit of this. My sense is students now kind of have a structure, and that's why we provided a 10 to 2 day, just so that you could kind of plan things around that. And then also office hours on Fridays as kind of a culminating opportunity to ask some questions before you went into the weekend. So for me, it goes without saying that organization is key anyways as a student, right? Your time management as a DS student, there's a lot of expected of you. A lot of you are involved in a ton of things. So, maybe in some ways with a lot of outside activities being curtailed, that has given you more time. But as you know, sometimes more time isn't always great. Sometimes its structure is better. And, maybe some of you have realized, wow, when I'm super busy, even though I might be a little stressed, I actually am more productive because I'm just getting things done because I know I've got a time limit. Whereas now you're like, well, I can watch some Netflix and then I'll go back and I'll read the physics homework and then I can go, So that would be my sense. How about from you? What has been successful? What have been some good strategies that you guys have used?
I thought the organization when the schedule started was good because I think during enrichment week, I would just do it right before it was due.
Yeah, right. But
Yeah.
that's better than what some people did. Some people didn't even do it. Jennifer.
Yeah, I kind of did the same thing. I just, go through all my emails and go through the schedules that the teachers send me, which it's like helpful when a teacher sends like, oh, do this on Monday, do this on Tuesday. That's just more clear in my opinion. But yeah, I would just go through and write down what I had to do on each day and then just try to do it like that. Because, sometimes if you're like, oh, this isn't due on Monday or Tuesday, I'll do it later in the week. And then you end up saving like everything for later in the week. So I would just make like a list and try to get as much done from that list as possible for that day.
Okay, that's great. Nora, Merritt, Sarah, anything different?
I did the same as Jen. I just wrote down like a schedule of like what days I would have a Zoom and like what I need to do that week and
Okay.
just cross it off.
I think the Zooms are really helpful. Like
Yeah.
when when Miss Collins assigns homework or something, I would like email her and be like, I didn't understand this problem, and she would be like, oh, let's go over it on our Zoom.
Yeah.
Afterwards, it would be helpful.
Cool. How many of you had used Zoom prior to this closure?
I hadn't.
Yeah, I hadn't either. So, I mean, we had used, Skype and a few other things. I've used WhatsApp because I've got some relatives overseas, but I'd never used Zoom, and I think it's pretty good. I know that people are some of your teachers using Google Meet or Google Hangout.
One of my teachers uses Google Meet, but it's not very good.
It's not, yeah.
The connection is always really bad. And for me, like with Zoom, I've never had any problems with my camera. It just picks up right away. But in Google Meet, it will be like, oh, we can't find your camera, or the audio is like bad. But
Okay. All right. That's good to know. That's good to know. So let's see. Who else do we got here? We got Lena, go ahead. Oh, I think are you muted? Oh. Keep saying you're muted. Try it again.
sometimes in the bottom corner, it says like join with audio. You like that.
How's that? Want to try it one more time? Can you hear us? Yeah, but we can't hear you. Just say hello.
Hi.
Oh, now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Sorry. I don't know why it's not connecting.
Oh, hey, Alan.
Okay.
How do you think juniors taking standardized tests?
Yeah, so the question is about juniors and standardized tests. Bless you. I think, well, obviously they have kept pushing off the SATs to the point where now we're into June. And I know that guidance has been looking at the SAT2s. The AP has changed greatly. Are any of you taking APs?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's going to be an interesting experiment. It's going to be a 45-minute exam, happening later, and with specific days. If we're back in school, we'll still have to take the exam at the time. So some of you might be taking them at home, even if we're back at school. Um, they are talking about the APs just having free response and being 45 minutes. And then, they've looked at a number of different secure pieces. So I think overall, the standardized testing is definitely going to be a little different. But I don't know if any of you saw the guidance video that was put together with the college reps. Did any of you happen to see that? Michael, you did?
Yeah.
They totally get it too. So colleges are impacted by this as well. So many of them are actually waiving the SAT as a requirement for some of the schools moving in. Some of them are saying that they'll take it, but they'll also have understanding that you weren't in school. So I think there's going to be a lot of flexibility around standardized testing from the College Board and all of their specific exams. So even though I know that's a source of angst for some students, please know that they have assured us that they are going to be as flexible as possible in looking at that, just because they know they can't treat it the same way that they would under normal circumstances. Michael, how are you?
So, Mr. Smith.
So I know you're probably desperately missing baseball, right?
Yeah, I've been getting out when I can.
Yeah.
So,
and I, with Major League Baseball and all that, I just saw something from John Krasinski put out a pretty cool video. They had some Beth Israel COVID nurses and doctors and specialists, and they brought them on a duck boat, and they brought them to Fenway, and Big Poppy did like a video conference, and they got to run around Fenway Park, which was awesome. Which was cool. And then the Red Sox Foundation has actually donated 4 tickets for life for Beth Israel Hospital to rotate through all of the various employees, which I thought was pretty generous.
Awesome. Yeah.
Which was cool.
Yeah.
So Michael, what's the next question?
How will half of term 3 affect our GPA?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So right now we had about 6 weeks of term 3. So what we're doing is we're putting term 3 on hold. If we do return and we have enough time in term 4, we'll probably combine term 3 and 4 into 1. So that'll just make up 1. And then this time where you're doing the credit, no credit work, really will just sort of be like the plus minus factor of your grade. So teachers have already assured us that, if you participated in this credit, no credit piece and you did your assignments and you were, like today, you're a participant, right? You're doing your part. Right. That would be the leverage to give you the benefit of the doubt. So if you were in the B range, maybe it's the B plus range, or the B plus, maybe it's the A minus to the A, or whatever the case may be. If we return and we have enough time in quarter 4, we will take what we had of term 3 and term 4, because those will be the actual real time in school, and we'll combine them. So then your overall GPA for the year will be first quarter, second quarter, your mid-year, and then third and fourth would be combined. So we would divide it by 3 terms and a mid-year instead of 4 quarters, a mid-year, and a final. So but once again, we're going to do everything to make sure that it's fair, that it's equitable, and we're looking at, every kind of situation and scenario. If, for example, we don't go back, then obviously we're going to have to look at term 3, and we might even say to students, well, if you wanted to use it towards your overall average, you could. If you don't want to, you don't have to. You know what I mean? So if you did well, you could get rewarded. If you struggled a little bit, and you were hoping to have the last 4 or 5 weeks of that quarter help you out, you wouldn't be penalized.
Awesome.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's helpful.
I'm assuring you guys that this is such an unprecedented time that we have to be as flexible with you as possible, because what we don't know is, say you struggled a little bit at the beginning of term 3. How can I say that you wouldn't have turned it around and did real well at the end? I can't, right? And I can't prove it either way, so I have to give you the benefit of the doubt. And the same goes for the term 3 people. I had a few students who emailed me saying I did really well, and I want it to count, and I'm saying we're going to find a way to make it count. So hopefully it's the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Hopefully we get you back. Hopefully get you back in the building. All right. Jackson, how are you? Jackson freeze?
I don't know.
Looks like he's frozen. He fell asleep with his eyes open. Alan, are you there? Oh. Jackson, can you hear us now? Jackson? I guess not. Alan, how are you? Alan, you got to take the mute off. All right, technology challenges. All right, so Nora, let's come back to you.
Okay.
What's the next question?
It is, let me check. How will this affect college?
Yes, so definitely check out the videos that the guidance department put together. Mr. O'Mara did it, and he had, I think, 6 different college reps: Vanderbilt, Providence, BC, maybe UMass. He had a whole bunch of them. And in terms of seniors, it's not going to, because all they really basically said is they just want to assure that you passed your courses for the second half of the year, right? That you just didn't have a total nosedive. So for seniors, that's not going to be a problem. I think for the group that it's more concerning are juniors, right? So for juniors, looking at schools and, you know, a junior year, obviously I get it. It's important, your GPA and all that. They're really just going to kind of be looking at half year, how you did, and then understanding the second half of the year is just so unprecedented that they're really going to, in many cases, they said they were just going to sort of waive, you know, what had happened, unless we do submit third and fourth quarter into one quarter, in which case, you know, we'd have a little bit more to go on. But definitely check out the video that was done by Mr. O'Mara through guidance. I think if they haven't sent it out yet, they're going to, because I think it was part of a junior seminar type of thing. And if more students want to get access to it, I'll have them send it out to everybody. But I thought it was good, especially hearing from those college reps themselves as to how they're looking at college and admissions and everything, because they've had to totally change their process from where they were.
Mm-hmm.
All right, who's next? Who was after Nora? Was it Sarah?
I think it was either me or Merritt. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. So Jennifer, go ahead.
Okay. The next one we kind of already talked about. It's so you know, you could talk a little bit about it if you want, but we could also move on to the next one. It's about kind of during this time, do you see it as more of an opportunity to try to incorporate more unconventional teaching methods? And I know you kind of already said we might do that in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and one of the things that's been pretty cool is our technology specialists have been giving a lot of input, a lot of PD to our teachers about trying different things. So I think a number of your teachers probably already use Google Classroom, but now they're expanding it to use a lot more of the platforms and the features of Google Classroom, Zoom, Screencastify. You know, there's just a lot more features of technology that they're looking to use. I think some even early on during the enrichment part, access to Khan Academy. So yes, I do. I think that we're going to see teachers using some of those resources in different ways moving ahead. I think, you know, for some teachers, they'll probably revert back to what they're most comfortable with and having some things, but I definitely think that some teachers are going to take this opportunity to kind of tweak how they teach, which I think can actually be a good thing. You know, I don't think there's anything that replaces the face-to-face, being in the classroom, being able to communicate and seeing the emotions of people and the discussion. But on the other hand, I think that the resources of differentiating instruction can be good, because some of you, whether it's your undergraduate or if you pursue graduate study, you will see some blended learning. You will at some point, or even in your professional careers that you go into, you will definitely have to do some online learning, some professional learning. I know a lot of MBA programs, for example, have that. A lot of medical programs have a combination. I know that my daughter, who's a junior at UNH, a nursing student, obviously she has clinicals that she has to go to and she has in-person classes, but then she also has these VSIMs, which she has to go through procedures of a virtual simulation of patients and everything. And she's been doing that well before the closure. So I just think that you guys getting some exposure to this now, the silver lining will be the benefit of just being familiar with, more interfaces as you go through. Hopefully that answered it. Merritt, what's the next question?
So this is about mental health.
Yep.
Considering the mental toll this isolation is taking on many, how do you recommend students and teachers cope with this new reality?
Yeah, so that's something we've talked a lot about, you guys, because for some people this is tougher than others. I mean, for everybody it's isolating. There's no doubt about it, and that's been really difficult. But for some, it's really, really hard. Please know that the guidance counselors are available, adjustment counselors. I think our teachers, it's been helpful for them to understand that how different people learn. I'm sure for some teachers it's been really hard, but just know that we've also, on the DS online website, there are a number of different resources out there. And guys, the biggest thing is if you know that somebody is struggling or really having a hard time with this isolation, reach out to your guidance counselor. If it's you, obviously reach out to your guidance counselor, but if it's a friend or somebody that's really having a hard time, the best way for us to get information and to support people is to know what's happening. And sometimes in this case of isolation, it's not as easy to know. And one of the trademarks of DS students has always been you look out for each other. And so if you know that there are some students that are really struggling with this on a long-term basis, to reach out to your guidance counselor, who can then reach out to their counselor and support students as they need to get the support, because it's a real adjustment. As I said, we were going 110 miles an hour and now we're going about 10. And as a result of that, that's really hard on people. I think it takes a psychological toll, regardless. I found that I was watching a lot of medical debriefings on the COVID-19, and for a day or two, I just had to stop. I was like, I need to walk away from this for a little bit, knowing full well that it's not going away tomorrow and I can still get my information, but I just couldn't at that point get myself so mired in, cases and fatalities and all that stuff. And I just said, you know what, I need a break from that for a day or two. And, tried to then focus on doing some different things. I guess another silver lining is, we've had some decent weather. So hopefully you guys have been outside. I can't stress the importance of just getting outside, even if it's in your yard or walking your neighborhood or, taking a walk with a parent or something like that, can be so good for you and for your, not only for your physical, but for your mental health as well, just because it's tough. It's springtime. It's nice. You want to get out. You want to do things. You want to play sports. You want to be with your friends. In a month or so, you're thinking about the beach, and all those things will come back. It's just right now, we're doing what the medical experts are saying is the best thing to do, so that we don't have a resurgence, because obviously I don't want to go into next fall and have a resurgence and then we have to close school again, right? Or if you're a senior and you're heading off to school, like Nora and Jennifer, that the last thing you want is to have your first semester experience at college be cut short, right? That would be miserable. So it's like we have to kind of do our due diligence now so that we can get back to, our hopeful plans for the future, and which will be exciting. And I can tell you that they will be exciting, and things will get better. Things definitely will get better. Sarah, what's our next question?
Sorry. The next question is about sports and like what they'll look like for the spring.
Yeah, it's excellent question. So, because so many of our students do participate in sports, or in the very least like to go and watch their peers play a sport, we have not canceled spring sports. The MIAA, which is our governing body, has been meeting on a frequent basis, and they're obviously taking their cues from the governor. Right now, we're looking at May 4th. If we do return to school, May 4th, we would still have a spring season. They would condense it. The TVL, which is our athletic league that we play in, has been looking at a condensed schedule too, where maybe we would just play TVL teams and not play teams outside the league and could still have a league championship. Miss Sullivan has been doing a lot of work with ADs. They do weekly Zoom meetings too to talk about different opportunities. So right now we're in a wait and see. I think if we go beyond May 4th, it might be hard to have a spring season. But the other thing they've done is they've also pushed the spring season out. So for example, it would normally probably end around the 1st of June. Now it would end near the middle to the end of June. For teams, you know, that continue to move forward, we would look at something like maybe having 5 track meets or maybe having 12 baseball games instead of 20. We would look at, you know, having a condensed schedule where we would play Holliston and Medway and Hopkinton and Westwood and Norton, teams within our league, instead of maybe not playing Wellesley or not playing Natick in a non-league game. The other thing to know too is the spring musical, Mamma Mia. Mr. Herman had set dates for May to reserve it in case we're able to do something late in May. So we haven't canceled that either. Right now it's on hold. We would want to make sure that the students and the cast and the crew and the directors, you know, had sufficient time to get everybody back together. But we were close to tech rehearsal week anyways, so we were pretty close. So I do think it would be a matter of, you know, maybe having another week, getting things back together. We might still be able to pull that off. So I'm optimistic that if we do return, we're going to get to do that. Nothing has been canceled. And in fact, even prom has not been canceled. Miss Waterman has been in contact with the hotel, and, you know, they have all of our information. And as long as we have social distancing guidelines are relaxed, we may still be able to do something. I'm not guaranteeing we're going to be able to, but I'm telling you that nothing right now has been canceled. And I hold an optimistic view that I'm not just going to make a blank cancellation. Instead, I'm going to hold out hope that we can keep trying to do something creative so that you guys get an end of the year celebration. It's ironic for seniors that we did the boat cruise in the fall, you know, where I know there was a lot of angst around that, and some of it tied in with SATs, and people weren't thrilled about it, and I get it, but it's ironic we ended up having it, and it's a good thing we did.
Yeah,
so, you know,
Everyone's happy that we did now.
yeah, it's just so funny, you know, that at least you have that excellent memory, and the world works in funny ways, I guess. But just make sure you're telling your friends, you know, they're bummed about things with sports or the drama program, that nothing yet has been canceled, and we're still looking at every potential option to ensure that we can give you guys an experience. Oh, my doorbell rang from my 50-pound watchdog. All right. Okay, Callie.
You kind of already answered the next question.
Oh, I did. Okay.
Yeah, it was about moving sports back, but you by that you guys were just meaning like until the very end of the year, because you like sports usually end before the year ends, because it was about like how that will affect summer jobs and vacations. But
yeah, absolutely. So we would still probably try to tie it into, it would have to end prior to school getting out, or right about the same time that the underclassmen got out, because we do understand, you know, jobs and summer vacations and you know, you got college seminars and different things to go to. Please note too that we'll also be flexible with students, because, you know, you couldn't have anticipated that. I think if we've got a team going that far, that's awesome. That means that we're right near the end, almost near the state finals. But in the very least, we want to still provide an experience. Mr. Hendricks and Mr. Schroeder, who do all the fields, you know, another silver lining to all this has been they have been able to do remarkable work with the fields and getting them ready, just because nobody's been on them. And so the fields will be ready to roll. The theater, they're, you know, making sure everything's good to go in there. It's just going to be, we're going to have to be in a wait and see standpoint. Are there any other questions? How about questions that maybe didn't make the initial list from basically things that I've said?
there were a few about like kind of, you answered bits and pieces of some of them, but it was, one of them was the senior class a consideration when making the decision to work through April break? Because then basically like we would just get an extra week of work. Like we're not getting out any earlier. I mean, all the other grades will get out earlier, but we still end on May 20, whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah, no, we definitely did, and I'm sure that for seniors that wasn't necessarily great. We did it because of momentum too. We felt like, the enrichment period, we understood that it was enrichment. It was sort of like, yeah, watch this YouTube video or take a look at this. This is cool, but it wasn't real learning. Whereas taking the 4 days, which a lot of our nearby schools also did, and we got input from them too, we felt like it would help the momentum. You are correct for the underclassmen. It would get them back. It would push them back to the 17th of June. But what we're also saying is we might be looking at when your last day is for seniors. So normally you'd have senior exams. And because we probably aren't going to have senior exams, what we are now discussing with the superintendent is, would the school committee and the superintendent be willing to give our seniors some of that time back in May? So let's say, for example, May 28th was scheduled to be the last day. Maybe it would be May 24th or 20, whatever that previous Friday is. So that's actually something that we're negotiating too. By state law, seniors are supposed to go 170 as a minimum. And what we're looking at is if we push that back a little bit and we, continued all of our days, we were fortunate that we had no snow days. Once again, kind of a silver lining, I guess, in some ways, because some schools are going till, the very end of June. Jennifer, we are going to look at that for seniors too. So you might still benefit from those days. It's just right now during April break, you unfortunately have to do it. If things had been relaxed earlier too, and typical vacations or trips could have been taken, we probably would have done something different too. But we looked at too the flexibility. I know that April break for a lot of juniors and sophomores, you go look at schools, those options weren't really there. Had those options been there for travel, for flights, and for college visits, we might have been talking about a different situation where, we would have said, no, we're taking the April break to give kids a break.
Yeah.
But it's a very good question. And just know that we're working on the senior part. We're trying to see what is the minimum we can have you in school, and like what can we count and not count. And so stay tuned for that. Hopefully I'll have some good news for you and I'll say, guess what? It was the 28th, now it's the 24th or whatever. Anybody else?
I think there were some others still on the list.
Okay, yeah, go ahead then. Michael, why don't you ask the next one?
Looks like the next one was like, personally, like, do you think that we'll like realistically return in May?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like I said, I'm optimistic. I think May 4th might be tricky. I could see us returning maybe with 9th, 10th, and 11th graders at the beginning of June. But that, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to pretend to be the medical expert. I'm looking at the number of people you would be re-entering into a building in a public school. You just have to really be careful and mindful of that. So here might be a scenario, and this isn't saying this is what we're going to do, but it could be a scenario where we close out the seniors, we still figure out what we can do for them for graduation, for some type of prom or something, and then we focus on 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, and you would only really kind of come in for 2 or 3 weeks, and you might say, well, I'm not sure that's worth it. Well, what it might do for us, though, is it might give us an opportunity to combine 3rd and 4th quarter so that you have a legitimate quarter. Also would enable us to return books and to, right now, all that stuff is at home. Like for seniors, we're not going to do the traditional senior project, turn your books in. Where are you going to turn them? Like, where are you going to bring them, right? So going back in June is still a possibility, just because we still feel like there could be some benefit from that.
Yeah, I think that you kind of answered parts of the other ones, but it was saying, if prom does get canceled, are you guys going to try to come up with another way for the senior class to connect in a lot in a social way. And
Yeah, we definitely are. We've talked about everything. We threw out ideas of some sort of car parade through the bus chute, and some sort of celebration where we take pictures and have a photographer on hand. And so we are talking about a lot of different things. I know that our advisors are reaching out to advisors of other schools. One of the advantages of being in the Northeast, some Southern schools get out of school a little bit early, so we'll be looking at what are some things they might be doing. The Pacific Northwest, I think, gets out a little bit earlier, so we might look at some of their plans too. That right now is just all up in the air. And I'm not really familiar with any schools right now that have just said, oh, those events are off. I just think people understand how important they are for the community and for students, that we're still holding out hope. What would you guys say would be one piece of information you could give to me that I could give to teachers that would be beneficial in this next couple of weeks of remote learning? What are some feedback that you think would be good for me to know, and then also for teachers to be aware of? Sarah, go ahead.
I was just thinking about, like, for, I don't know, or Lila's in my English class, but I know for English, at least, like, I feel like, yes, it's like the same, like, we're still learning, obviously, but I feel like we could maybe, like, minimize, like, the expectations, because it's just, like, hard to work on, like, 2 papers that are due, like, on the same day, practically. Okay. So it's just kind of like, yes, it would be like manageable if we were in school, but I feel like now we have so much free time, which, as you said earlier, it's like harder to like manage what you're doing with your time now. But I just feel like it's overwhelming, because like a lot of us are being like flooded with emails, and we're like confused what's happening, because like there was the email that was sent out about like we're having A, B, and C on this day, and then like the rest of the classes on the next day, and we're like going between them. But I don't think all the teachers are following that schedule, so you're unsure like what's happening on what day. Okay. So like it's just kind of difficult to follow along, at least for me. Like that's why I had to write out the schedule, and it was helpful, but it's just still kind of confusing, which I know like teachers get that, because like they don't know what's going on probably either. I mean, like it's a pandemic, so like who knows? But I feel like it would be like helpful if maybe not the expectations lowered, but like just more manageable work for the time being, seeing like we're not actually having like communication with our English teacher, for example, or like our physics or math or whatever. Yeah. Because you only have so much time with them over Zoom, and it's different than a classroom where like you could get a bunch done within like 15 minutes, but Zoom, it's kind of more difficult because like teachers don't have like whiteboards at their houses. Like
right. Somebody told me Mr. Baruti does though.
Oh, really? Does too. He has like a big.
Yeah.
It's still hard. I agree. I have like the same thing. I almost think that some teachers have sent like super long rambling emails with like a whole, and it makes no sense to me. I read it and I'm like, I still don't know what exactly I should do and when. Okay. And then there's some teachers who literally will put like Monday and write one thing under it, Wednesday, one thing under it. If you don't finish it during our time block, do it for homework. And that probably took them like 5 minutes to type up. And it's just way more, I just think it's way easier to figure it out from, in my mind, the way it works. Like what I was saying with Sarah, I have to make a list, Monday do this, Tuesday do this, and physically cross it out. That's just kind of how I work. So it's
kind of creating the schedule of, you meet on Monday, you're going to meet on Wednesday, this is due Wednesday, and just specify.
Yeah.
Chapter 2, due Wednesday, instead of, hey, by the end of the week, have this done or whatever, right?
Yeah, or even just literally making like a simple schedule. Some teachers have probably just had a heading that said Monday and had the 2 things we needed to do, and then on Wednesday, whatever, which in my opinion, I feel like it's much easier to then block out what you need to do on each day and quickly check your email and say, oh, we need to do this on Wednesday, instead of just having some like long email explaining like some things that I'm like, I don't know when this is due or what
Yeah.
is due
And
when.
and Sarah, to your point, we did hear that some teachers were trying to like meet at different times and all that. So we did send out a clarifying email saying, as much as we understand your lives are disrupted, we have to follow the schedule, because if we start going off the schedule now, students are like, I can't be in two places at once. I can't be in physics and in English, or I can't, be working on this and working on that. So I'm hoping that gets better, because we did specify that that needs to happen. So okay, those are good. Those are good. Anything else? Anything from a guidance standpoint that you'd like to see? I mean, for seniors, you're pretty much all set. You just want to make sure final transcripts get sent out and good to go, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Well, as I said, I am so grateful for the students we have at DS. You are fantastic people. I know this has been really hard. I think that you guys have done the very best you can with it. I've been very, very proud of the students. I've been pleased with many of the teachers and some of the creativity. It's not the same. It's not meant to be the same. I'm hoping that, in our lifetime, we never have to face something like this again. If we do, hopefully we're more prepared and have a better framework for it. This will be an interesting time in your life. You'll certainly remember. You're all old enough to remember the pandemic, and kind of how it changed your life. There's always different things of, where were you when JFK was shot? Where were you when 9/11 took place? Where are you? There are different things in different lives, and certainly this pandemic will be one of those pieces of history that you'll look back and say, during the pandemic, I remember, X, Y, and Z. And it'll probably be less about the homework assignments you do and all of that, but rather, what your families did and what you guys did to sort of get through it. And we will get through it. And as a result of it, I think there'll be many ways that we'll be better as people, better as a society and as a country. And hopefully, moving ahead, that we have a greater appreciation for some of the basics in life. I think, just recognizing our health and how vital and how important that is, our friends and our families and the loved ones, how important it is for them, and for us. And, that sometimes these things that we'd rather be doing right now, they're important, but they're not as important as, knowing that your sister's okay, knowing that your mom's okay, knowing that your brother's okay, and and that we'll get through it.